Rich's house after the car goes down Laurel Glen and parks down the street near farmhouse.
Yeah.
This is just for the record. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 49. Can you show us in 49 where you were?
I was over by like where like the shade is coming across the street.
So here on the left side of the road here?
Yeah.
So you were maybe one house up maybe, or just before the second property?
Yeah.
And would you agree with me that Farmhouse Road is somewhere down this area up here?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm directing my pen somewhere near the intersection of Farmhouse Road and Laurel Glen, Your Honor, at the top of 49.
All right, so noted.
And when you were in that area, you indicated you couldn't hear what was being said.
No.
And could you see people down the road?
Yes.
And you indicated that you knew Tyler Rich went down the road?
Yes.
Did you know anybody else from your friends that went down the road?
No.
But it was more than one person?
Yes.
And when Tyler Rich went down the road, how long would you say you watched what was going on down the road?
Maximum a minute.
Okay. And at some point in time, did you turn around and walk back to the house?
Yeah.
So in that minute, when you were watching what was happening down the road, you saw people talking?
Yeah.
Did you see any fighting going on down the road?
No.
Now, when you got back to the house, got back to Tyler Rich's house, you said you were in the basement area, but that included, in your mind, the stairway?
Yeah, I was right next to the stairs.
So were you at the top of the stairs or were you at the bottom?
I'm at the bottom of the stairs, but like right at the bottom of the stairs.
And when you're at the bottom of the stairs, are there other people in the basement?
Yeah.
And what's happening in the basement?
People hanging out there.
Just hanging out.
Yeah.
And do you recall every single person that was in the basement at that given time?
No.
Why don't you recall who was in the basement?
I just knew they were my friends.
Some of your friends included the names that we mentioned during your testimony today and yesterday?
Yeah.
At some point in time, you heard their back,
Yeah.
and you go back outside. You're one of the first people outside?
Yes.
And when you're outside, you walk up to the defendant?
Yes.
And at some point in time, you have a conversation with the defendant, pull his shirt off?
Yes.
How long would you say that interaction happened before you noticed Tyler Rich punched the defendant in the face?
A minute.
Okay. And when Tyler, before the punch, did you anticipate there was going to be a fight? A physical fight?
No.
When the punch happens, is that when the fight starts?
Yes.
And when the fight starts, my question to you is, how soon after when that punch is thrown from Tyler Rich, when you're on top of the defendant, do you feel pain in your side?
No more than 30 seconds.
No more than 30 seconds? Could it have been more, could it have been less?
Less.
So you punch him twice and then you feel pain?
Yeah.
Soon after you punch him, you see what motion do you see?
It's like his fists balled up like this and just going like that repeatedly.
Before you engaged with the defendant, before he got punched, did you see if he had anything in his hands at that point in time? I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any cross?
Briefly.
Okay.
Said before Tyler Rich threw that punch, you never anticipated a fight, right?
No.
And you told us that how soon after was it when this fight broke out that you started to feel pain, and you said that was 30 seconds, right?
Yes.
And then the state's attorney asked you, could have been more, right?
He did say that.
And you said, no, less, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you would agree that it's always less. It could never have been a longer period of time when you've been asked on a series of questions about how long something lasted, right?
I'm gonna object to this argument.
I'm going to sustain the objection on that. Get mischaracterized and it's argument. Thank you.
Couldn't have been any longer than 30 seconds.
No.
And you told us yesterday that you didn't participate in any of that group chat, but now you've said maybe in that car ride is when you admit you sent at least one text, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't participate in that at all at Tyler Rich's house, right?
No.
You told us you didn't see anything in Mr. Valley's hands, correct? When he was standing there facing you.
I was not looking at his hands.
You reached out and you pulled the shirt off of him, you claim, correct?
Yes.
He didn't punch you at that point.
No, he just got like super upset.
He didn't shove you at that point.
No.
He didn't touch you in any way.
No.
He didn't show you a knife.
No.
He didn't say, hey, I've got a knife, I'm gonna cut you.
No.
And so from the time that Tyler Rich punched Mr. Valley in the face until the time that you felt the pain and got off of Mr. Valley, that was at least 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
30 seconds, you're standing over him, punching him in the face only two times.
Yes.
Nobody else has joined in with you.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Nothing further.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please watch your step as you exit the witness. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Good morning. Still morning. Thank you so much. Please step into the stand, remain standing. My clerk to my right here is going to join you, okay? Thank you so much.
Please raise your right hand. You solemnly and sincerely affirm that the case may be, that the evidence shall give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God upon penalty of perjury. If so, please say I do. I do. Thank you. Please state your full name, spell your last name, and address for record.
Brian, that's Donald, deal with that. And my address, 1200 Ridge Road, Newtown.
Thank you.
You may be seated. Thank you. You may proceed.
Good. Almost afternoon, Dr. Doss. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. And Dr. Doss, it's a little bit difficult for everyone to hear in this courtroom. The acoustics are rough, so if you just keep your voice as much as possible. Sit as close to the microphone as you can. Okay, Dr. Doss, where are you currently employed?
St. Vincent's Medical Center in Bridgeport.
And how long have you been employed at St. Vincent's?
I think 8 years.
And is there a particular branch of medicine in which you specialize in?
Emergency medicine.
And is there a particular department that you work in at St. Vincent's Medical Center?
I'm the emergency department.
And please tell members of the jury your educational background, including any degrees you hold.
I have a medical degree, of course, and a history and philosophy science degree from undergraduate school.
And where did you attend school?
University of Washington in Seattle, and then Ross University for medical school.
And your residency is done?
Detroit Receiving Hospital.
And your work experience. Please tell members of the jury where you've worked.
First Detroit Receiving Hospital, and then I worked in a small hospital in Georgia, and then a hospital in New Zealand for about a year, and after that returned to this country, and I've been at St. Vincent's ever since.
And what are your duties working at St. Vincent's?
I'm one of the attendings in the emergency department, so it's seeing patients that are presenting there and managing the physician's assistants who also work in the emergency department.
How many attendings are in the ER, approximately?
At a given time, there would be three or four. In total, I think there are, it's gotta be maybe 12 employed there. Probably more, but I'm not going to keep track of that.
So any given time of night that you're working, there's about 3 or 4 of you attending?
Yes.
And have you ever testified in court today?
No.
Do you have any teaching responsibilities?
Yes, we teach the internal medicine residents that rotate through the emergency department, so they get work experience there, and medical students from come there too.
You had also mentioned physician's assistants. Do you supervise them or oversee them?
Yes.
And please explain in that capacity.
So they are employed there as fairly independent providers. They see patients on their own, but also work directly with the attendings and what we call staff patients with the attendings, meaning if they describe to the attending what's going on and make sure the plan is appropriate and do some of the procedures to take some of the workload off of the attendings, like laceration repairs and things.
What would determine whether or not you do a procedure or a physician's assistant does the procedure?
A variety of things. Generally, how critical is the situation, how potentially dangerous is the procedure, and for things that are immediately life-threatening, intubations, meaning, taking a person's breathing and such is generally something the attending would do.
In back of May of 2022, did you work in the emergency department at St. Vincent's Medical Center?
Yes.
And on any given day or night, how many patients did you see?
Typically about 16 to 20 per shift.
And that was you personally?
Yes.
Direct your attention specifically to Sunday, May 15th of 2022. Do you recall working in the ER at St. Vincent's Medical Center?
Yes.
And there come a time when you examined a patient by the name of Ryan Hines.
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to review Ryan Hines' medical records before coming to court today?
Yes.
May I approach counsel, Your Honor?
Thank you.
Dr. I'll show you with some dates 9330 for purposes. Please stop. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that document as?
The medical record for Ryan Hines.
And is it in the regular course of St. Vincent's Medical Center to prepare such a document such as the one you see present here?
Yes.
And is it the regular course of business for nurses and doctors to maintain such records at St. Vincent's Medical Center?
Yes.
And is it procedure for doctors and nurses to record such things on such a document accurately at or around the time that a patient is seen?
Yes.
And is this documentation certified?
Yes.
I would ask you to mark the exhibit.
Attorney Smith, any objection?
No objection.
All right, Carl, go ahead and accept the evidence as full states 93.
Standing back now with full exhibit 93.
Thank you.
Your recollection, or if you can look at state 93, what time was Ryan Hines brought into St. Vincent's Medical Center on that day or morning?
Let me just double check the time. Was this, 12:24 a.m.
And where was he brought upon his arrival?
Directly to the emergency department in one of what we call the trauma rooms, which are a larger room in the front for with more space and more equipment for major injuries.
How many trauma rooms at St. Vincent's Hospital Center?
Two.
And can you explain to members of the jury what indicates whether or not someone comes in as a trauma level, or what makes someone come in trauma level?
Right, there are some standard criteria that we go by that are primarily based on mechanism of the injury, the type of injury the patient has, or how much force was involved, and also the condition of the patient. So if they are unstable or confused, and in this case it was the penetrating wound to the chest that made them trauma.
The mere fact that Ryan Hines came with a penetrating wound to the chest indicates that he was labeled as a trauma level?
Yes.
How is trauma level different than triage level?
A triage level is a general concept of how potentially sick someone might be that goes all the way from triage level 1, which is the most potentially deadly situation, and a triage level 5, which is something that is not concerning at all, and that is something that is determined by a nurse out front and triage based on vital signs and complaint, and helps organize who should be brought into the emergency department first and be seen before someone else who has likely a less serious condition. And so it's related, but the trauma criteria are specifically for injuries, and when someone is brought in as a particular trauma level, 1 or 2, that automatically triggers the arrival of the trauma surgeons and different staff members to help stabilize the situation.
Now, to your knowledge, how was Ryan Hines brought to the hospital?
By ambulance.
And explain to members of the jury, do you get indication from EMS when a patient is being brought in? Is there an alert system that's put into effect?
Yes, they don't necessarily call ahead about every patient, but for potentially serious conditions, they will call ahead on the radio. We get a heads up that they're arriving. They give us a brief description of the situation so that we can prepare.
And can you please explain to members of the jury how the patient, Mr. Hines, presented upon his arrival?
He presented, brought in by ambulance. He was awake and alert, but uncomfortable, and they had called ahead saying he had a penetrating wound to the left chest and left leg.
So you knew at that point how many wounds there were?
We knew of at least 2, I think, 3 wounds. I think it was the chest and flank leg. Yes, we knew it.
And do you recall where you specifically observed those wounds?
I observed them in the trauma room upon patient's arrival.
And prior to that morning, you had occasion to attend to patients who had suffered from stab wounds.
Yes.
And based on your training experience, were Ryan Hines' injuries consistent with stabs?
Yes.
Did you observe your did you base your conclusions on self-reporting, or did you base that on your own personal observations, or both?
My own personal observations.
Did Mr. Hines indicate to you, or do you recall if he indicated that he had been stabbed prior to?
We had been informed ahead of time by EMS that he had. I don't actually recall if I directly asked him that question.
But you had knowledge that he was?
Yes.
Were you aware of the apparatus that was used to stab him?
I did not know the details of the input. We were told it was a knife, but I didn't know anything about the size or length of the knife.
Prior to seeing a patient, is it typical for the nurses to have contact or make contact with a patient?
Depending on the situation. In this case, everyone kind of met the patient at the same time, but oftentimes the nurses do initially evaluate the patient before the doctors.
And why in this situation was it everyone hands on deck when the patient came in versus the patient going with the nurses, getting assessed? Explain why that was done in this case.
Because for this type of injury, our concern is that it may be immediately life-threatening, and we need to intervene right away.
Then direct your attention to States 93, page 5, States 93. The last line of that page, just page numbers of the jury, what it says.
Is this the CT report on page 5 here? Or is this the CT of the abdomen pelvis with IV contrast?
Yes, so it indicates CT of the abdomen, pelvis with, okay. If you could read the last line of that.
Clinical data, trauma 1, stabbed chest and flank pain.
What is flank pain?
The flank is the side of your body below your ribs, essentially, the side of your abdomen.
Directing your attention still to that same exhibit, page 7, towards the bottom of that exhibit, what does it say under CT head without contrast, final results?
It says, number 1, no acute post-traumatic intracranial abnormality, and number 2, undisplaced fractures of both nasal bones.
Number 2, undisplaced fractures of both nasal bones. What is that in layman's terms?
It means he had a broken nose.
Broken nose?
Mm-hmm.
And had you read about this information or known about this information prior to Ryan Hines' arrival at the hospital?
No.
Directing your attention to page 12 of States 93, towards the mid to bottom portion of that page where your notes begin.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your electronic signature that appears there?
Yes.
Indicated there, it also indicates that it was signed, and it also indicates filed. Is that the time that you had seen him, where it says 205, or is that just?
That's when the document was filed in the system. The date of service is when he was seen.
I'm looking at States 93, page 12. What does the acronym HPI refer to?
History of present illness.
And if you can please refer, John, in reference to HPI, what does it indicate you did?
I'm sorry, could you?
Sure. Direct your attention onto page 13 of 693. It indicates the continuation of the history of present illness.
Right.
Can you please indicate what the chief complaint was and then what was that?
Right, so the chief complaint here, stab wound to the left chest, left flank, and left thigh. And in the remaining history, I'm describing any medical conditions the patient has, a 16-year-old male with no chronic medical conditions, describing the situation that led to their arrival in the emergency department. Would you like me to read it? Or?
Yes.
Okay. This is a 16-year-old male with no chronic medical conditions who presents to the emergency department after being involved in an altercation, which resulted in a stab wound to the left lateral chest wall, left flank, and left thigh. He also suffered an abrasion to the superior scalp and head injury, likely from being kicked. The patient was at an event this evening, did ingest some alcohol but no illicit substances, got into an altercation with someone who left and returned with a knife, resulting in this further altercation. The patient is complaining of pain at the site of the stab wounds and some worsening difficulty breathing pre-hospital. He has been oxygenating while on room air, he was getting enough oxygen. He has had no evidence of tension pneumothorax per EMS. However, they do note decreased or absent breath sounds on the left. The patient has been hemodynamically stable pre-hospital.
Are these all of your notes that you took?
Yes.
Okay. And taking you back through that paragraph, chief complaint, stab wound to the left chest, left flank, left thigh. Please demonstrate on your body where those areas would be.
So,
Members of the jury.
the left chest here, where the ribs are, and the left flank below the area of the ribs, and the left thigh here in the upper leg.
The record reflects, Your Honor, that the witness is identifying stab wound by pointing to his own body, on his left chest, like left flank area, as well as left thigh.
Court will identify that the witness has identified by using physical motions on the stand as assisted.
Dr. Doss, stab wound to left lateral chest wall, is that the same thing as the left chest?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say chest wall, what does that mean?
We're just referring to the external surface of the chest here, and the left lateral, the lateral aspect is kind of the side. We just have to have a fancy term for everything, so that's just referring to the stab wound in the chest wall on the left side of his body.
Abrasion to the superior scalp and head injury likely from being kicked. How did you determine that?
This was to tell you the truth, I can't recall how we determined that. This is generally from information we're obtaining from EMS and the patient, but I don't recall exactly who told me about the kick to the head.
So an abrasion, what is that?
A scratch.
Is it something that's deeper than paper cut, for instance?
No, it's probably about the same depth. Generally, when we're talking about abrasions, thinking more not such a simple little linear scratch, but kind of when a larger area of the skin is damaged and abraded, we call it just scraped.
Could it produce bleeding?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're saying likely being kicked, that could have been self-reporting or like this at EMS?
Yes.
Where it indicates pain at the site of the stab wounds, is that something that Ryan Hines would have indicated that he would ask his pain level, for instance?
Yes.
And worsening difficulty breathing pre-hospital. Explain that.
So this is a combination of information from the patient and EMS, basically describing that he was feeling that he was getting more short of breath, he was having more difficulty breathing as time passed in the time period it took to get to the hospital.
Would that be typical of a wound to the chest wall?
It can be. It depends on really how bad the wound is and what the situation is.
Could you have a wound to the chest wall that would not penetrate a lung?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, the ribs are protecting the area, and then whatever object does not penetrate through past the ribs into the lung, which can happen.
Being that the patient was complaining or indicating that he wasn't breathing very well, did that indicate to you that there was a possibility that his lung had been punctured?
Yes.
Back to page 93, page 13, that same paragraph. No evidence of tension.
Pneumothorax.
Pneumothorax, thank you, for EMS. What is that terminology, pneumothorax?
So pneumothorax is just the fancy term for air in the chest wall outside of the lung, and causing the lung to collapse. Tension pneumothorax is a specific type of that, which because of, not to get too far into the weeds, a one-way valve of a kind of the pressure continues to increase inside the chest. The air can enter but not exit through that wound, and the lung is pushed further and further, and then ultimately, other structures in the neck and chest are pushed to the point where the heart cannot beat properly, and people can die very quickly.
They do no decreased or absent breath sounds on the left. Patient has been hemodynamically stable pre-hospital. What does that
means that hemodynamically stable is just referring to things like his blood pressure and his heart rate. We're watching those to make sure that there isn't any sign of that kind of compromise to the function of the heart or the circulatory system, which we would see if his blood pressure were dropping, likely his heart rate is increasing to try to compensate. That was not, those kinds of dynamic changes were not happening on the way to the hospital.
Directing your attention to exhibit, page 93, about mid-page on page 14, where it says pulmonary, chest, abdominal, and musculoskeletal. Under pulmonary, where it indicates absent breath sounds, diminished breath sounds, right upper lung field. Was that, when you saw that, was that concerning to you at all, and why?
Yes, specifically the absent breath sounds on the left would be concerning in this context because that would make us worried that he had suffered injury to his lung and that had collapsed and was not functioning properly. The diminished breath sounds in the right upper lung field are relatively nonspecific, just meaning that we're not hearing quite as well in this area, so we need to make sure that that's okay as well.
And you had indicated earlier that a certain condition can occur if left unattended. Can you explain what that condition is and why that would be something that would be life-threatening?
The tension pneumothorax? Yes. So that would be kind of this steadily increasing pressure within the chest cavity that is starting to push everything, is impaired, and now the heart's not able to continue circulating blood, and this would result in death.
That's obviously a very serious situation.
Yes.
And if Ryan Hines had been left unattended and not brought to the hospital to tend to that, is that something that could have caused death?
Yes.
Directing your attention to page 14 as well, on page 93, where it says stab wound under abdominal, stab wound left lateral flank, musculoskeletal, stab wound left lateral thigh, left lateral flank, left lateral thigh. Anything about those wounds that were concerning to you regarding any arteries that were around that area or anything of the sort?
Right, I think we always get concerned with an abdominal or flank wound because, of course, there are many important organs in there that if they're directly injured, you can have quite a lot of internal bleeding quickly, the spleen, the kidney on that side. And with the wound in the thigh, we have to consider, of course, injury to a major blood vessel and bleeding from that. The location on the thigh was a little less concerning for that kind of problem.
Directing your attention to the bottom of page 14 on page 93, where it says MDM, clinical impression notes. What does MDM, that acronym, refer to?
Just medical decision making. It's a section to describe what we were thinking, what we did.
And where it indicates in that paragraph, it says portable chest x-ray confirms left side pneumothorax, no evidence of hemothorax. What does that sentence refer to?
So that says that when we took an x-ray of his chest, this is in the trauma room still, he's in the stretcher, we're taking a film right there, we can see that that left lung has collapsed. We do not see evidence of fluid filling the chest cavity, which in this context, we'd be worried about blood filling up his chest. That was not the case.
On an x-ray, what would you see to indicate the lung had collapsed, for instance?
You can see for an inflated lung, the lung markings there and the absence of them. And often you can, in the case of pneumothorax, often you can see kind of the border of the lung as well, so you can see how much it has collapsed.
Could you see in an x-ray any kind of penetrating wound, like a laceration or anything that would cause that lung to collapse?
You can see secondary findings of it. It's not a study that's going to show the soft tissues like that, but you can see things like swelling in the air. You can see some air tract entering the chest wall, that type of thing. So you can see secondary findings of it. Stab wound.
It indicates also on page 14 of 93, a chest tube is in place for the trauma service and further trauma workup is pending. What was the purpose of that chest tube?
That is a device that's placed into the chest to suction essentially the air out of the chest cavity, allow that lung to reinflate. And if there were blood in the chest cavity, it would also be draining that fluid out of there.
Directing your attention to page 15 of page 93, at the top of that page, patient will be admitted in the trauma service for further care. What was the purpose of that?
The initial period of time after placing that chest tube, although, of course, a good thing that the lung is reinflating, that needs time to heal somewhat before the chest tube is removed, which would typically take place in the hospital before the patient is sent home. So they need time to make sure the lung is inflating again and staying that way, and remove the chest tube and ensure the lung doesn't collapse again once it's removed.
Page 15 of States 93 under critical care indicates the patient was critically ill with a high probability of imminent or life-threatening deterioration. That notation, does that reference what you described before regarding the, I'm going to say the word wrong, but the tension that you were describing, which could have caused death?
Well, not only that, but even without the tension pneumothorax component, this can be a deadly injury. And so this is a situation where until the patient was stabilized, the likelihood of him dying was relatively high.
Now, I'm going to be showing you some photographs that have already been marked into evidence. Showing you what's been marked as States 84. The screen in front of you, you can just reference that, or you can look up here. Do you see that on your screen?
Yes.
Okay. What would you describe that as?
This is the abrasion to the scalp, as mentioned.
And showing you States 83.
All right.
Specifically towards the hairline there.
Right.
Same abrasion that you're describing.
Yes, it is.
And showing you what's been marked as States 85. Are you able to identify what this is and describe to the jury what the purpose of that would be?
This is that chest tube that was mentioned. There are different types of these and different sizes. This is a device that's placed in the front of the chest, and a relatively smaller size, which is mainly meant to pull air out of the chest rather than fluid.
And does that go directly into the wound?
No, it goes elsewhere in the chest wall in between the ribs in a way that is designed to be at a certain angle so that when the tube is removed, that space closes on its own.
Showing you States 86. And if this is the wrong orientation, I can certainly flip it. So, are you able to see, is this the right rotation? Do you need me to?
I think so. It's just a bit, just angled, but I think this is the left side. Yes, this is the left side of the patient's chest. So in this photograph, the way we have it oriented, his head would be up at the top, off the side of the screen.
Okay. And this tube that you see pictured on States, apologize, 86, is that connected to that port you just indicated?
Yes, that's the chest tube.
Okay. And this gauze here with the tape, what is that over?
I think that is over the stab wound itself.
Showing you States 87. Flip that. What is this a photograph of?
That is the photograph of the stab wound to the chest wall.
That's the wound that punctured the lung?
Yes.
And showing you States 89. What is that a photograph of, Dr. Doss?
And that's the stab wound to the left flank.
Left flank. And showing you States 91. What is that a photograph of?
That's the stab wound to the left thigh.
Okay, and that's obviously a different stab wound than the left flank stab wound you just indicated.
Yes.
And finally, States 92. Would you agree with me that these are photographs of all the puncture wounds that Ryan Hines suffered?
Yes.
Okay. And the one at the top of States 92, this would be the left flank.
Oh, no, that's the left lateral chest. And the left flank is the one below that.
Thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
Left flank is the one below, mid-exhibit, and then the last stab wound is to the, what did you refer to that as?
The thigh.
Thigh. Thank you. Directing your attention back to States 93, page 20, where it says underneath H&P encounter notes. What does that mean, H&P encounter notes?
So this is the history and physical that's written by the trauma service. And encounter notes is just a general term for notes we took regarding this encounter with the patient.
And that was a physician's assistant that took those notes, if you can see?
Yes, it looks like it was Matei Manea.
And where it indicates a 16M, is that 16-year-old male?
Yes.
Okay, stabbed in left chest, mid-ax line with about a 4/5 intercostal, left flank, left lateral hip. What does that mean?
So he's describing the location of these stab wounds. That left chest mid-ax line is an abbreviation for mid-axillary line. And the axilla is the armpit, so the middle of the armpit, basically a line drawn from the armpit down, and then the other two stab wounds.
Hemodynamically stable with mild tachycardia, left pneumothorax without significant hemo. What does that mean?
He's abbreviating hemothorax there. So he's saying there is the collapse of the lung on the left without blood collected in the chest wall. And the hemodynamically stable means his blood pressure has been steady, but his heart rate is fast, probably compensating for the injuries.
Is it safe to say that the physician's assistant also tended to the wounds of Mr. Hines? So where it says place a 14 French pigtail cath anterior second intercostal space, what does that mean?
So that's this chest tube. When they say pigtail catheter, it's a kind of catheter that is built to twist in there so it's not directly puncturing anything else. And this is describing where that was placed. It was the anterior, the front of the chest, in the second intercostal space, and they're just counting down the second rib and that space in below the rib.
Is that what we saw in the photographs that were just depicted?
Yes.
And adequate re-expansion of the lung, mild air leak. Is that something that repairs on its own?
Yes, they monitor that. When this chest tube is hooked up, it's connected to a kind of suction device, and they're monitoring that pressure over time, and that air leak typically would get better as the wound heals.
It also indicates washed out stab wounds small enough that will heal by secondary intention to avoid closing and having infection. What does that mean?
That means that the two wounds, the one on the flank and the thigh, well, actually, including the stab wound on the chest, they washed these out, but they did not want to suture them closed because they would worry that would increase the risk of an infection in the wound to kind of close everything up inside of there. So they let it heal by secondary intention, which is just the term for letting that kind of close on its own and heal from the inside out instead of closing the skin.
Is that pretty standard with wounds such as this, to not suture them?
Yes.
Directing your attention to page 22 of SACE 93, where it indicates secondary, withdrawn primary assessment and secondary assessment. What is the difference between the two of those?
These are specific to the trauma process. When patients come in after injuries like this, the primary assessment is what is immediately life-threatening happening right now. Is the patient breathing? Are they circulating blood well? Are they able to talk to us and they're what we call protecting their airway? They can keep their airway open. And then the secondary assessment is a head to
Page withdrawn. On page 22 of that exhibit, under primary assessment, where it indicates breathing, minimally labor with some associated
dyspnea.
Thank you. What does that mean?
That means that his breathing was a little bit fast, a little bit difficult. He appeared to be having a little bit of a hard time breathing. That's what they say by minimally labored. And dyspnea is the subjective sensation of shortness of breath. When someone feels short of breath, that's called dyspnea.
How long does that typically last with an injury such as this?
After the chest tube is placed, that can resolve pretty quickly, but without that, it would last for a while. If the patient survives, it would be a process of healing that would take some time, days probably.
Do you know how long Mr. Hine was kept in the hospital for?
2 nights, and then actually I wasn't sure if it was 1 night or 2 nights. I think it's 2 nights though, ultimately.
And what was the purpose of keeping him for so long?
That is to monitor the effectiveness of the chest tube and make sure that air leak resolves, that once that wound starts kind of closing on its own and there's no longer the passage to allow air out of the chest or into the chest cavity, then they can safely remove the chest tube. So it's really that period of time to monitor and make sure things are not getting worse and that they're getting better.
Under where it says secondary assessment on page 22 of SACE 93, it does indicate nose, and it says no injury. That was a little surprising to me, as you had indicated that he did suffer some broken nose. Why does it say no injury there?
I think this is fairly common in a situation like this where that was not their primary focus, and so that can be missed. It may have been the case. I mean, I think looking back at the photographs, his nose was not visibly injured that badly, so it wasn't something that was focused on. And it may not have been particularly tender when they felt the area, so they didn't appreciate looking at the nose that it looked injured. And then we saw in the CAT scan that he did have a broken nose.
That indeed was. States 93 on page 64 of that exhibit Do you see any indication on this page of the patient, if the patient's blood was tested for alcohol?
Yes, let's see. Yes, I do see that.
Okay. And what does it indicate?
That the result of that test was a value of 7 milligrams per deciliter.
What does that mean in BAC terms in blood alcohol?
Right.
If you can convert that.
For the state of Connecticut, I think the legal limit of driving is if you blow a .08 on the breathalyzer, that would be an 80 on this measurement, so 80. So this is like a .007 or something.
0.007.
Right, yes.
Now, based on your expertise with the fact that Ryan Hines had a .007 BAC level, will that have affected his injuries, the way he was treated in any way?
No, it would really just indicate that he had something to drink earlier in the night, but this was not a level of alcohol that would have caused his injuries to be more complicated or caused him to be intoxicated. Clinically, we say, like not, visibly intoxicated, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Dr. Goss. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Smith, come on up.
Good afternoon, Dr. Doss.
Hi, good afternoon.
We've never met before. Correct.
Yes, correct.
So I'm just going to ask you a brief series of questions. You said as far as the nose, no injury. That could have been because it didn't appear to be visibly injured. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Sorry, the head nods aren't caught by the court
Right.
reporter. Have you ever testified before in court?
No.
Oh, okay. So the court reporter here has got to hear a yes or a no, so if you just do that for us.
Got it. Yes.
And you said the patient himself wasn't complaining of pain to the nose.
Not that I recall.
And then you said then there was a CAT scan that was done, and that reflected that there was a, correct me if I'm wrong, non-displaced fracture, correct?
Correct.
Did that give you any indication of the age of that non-displaced fracture?
We can generally tell on imaging if the fracture is what we call acute, meaning this just happened or not, because healing starts pretty quickly. So
Okay.
this was an acute injury that
Okay.
just occurred.
Gotcha. And the description in the notes that you were looking at said that superior scalp and head injury likely from being kicked, correct?
Correct.
That's based on self-report?
I'm afraid I don't recall where that information came from, so I cannot speak to whether it was accurate or not. I think it was secondhand information. Of course, for me, it would have been secondhand information, but I don't know who told us that.
Okay. And that the patient did admit to some alcohol use, correct?
Yes,
And that was confirmed by the results of the toxicology, correct?
yes,
And that he also denied any illicit substances, correct?
correct.
But that, however, was not confirmed by the toxicology because that did reflect on page 11 positive for cannabinoid, correct?
Let me take a look.
Page 11.
Let's see. Yes, that's the result is positive. It doesn't necessarily speak to when the cannabis was used.
Okay. All right. And so you've told us today what you did as far as treating him for his wounds, correct?
Yes,
But you couldn't tell us or help this jury if what they wanted to know was why what had happened to him that evening, correct?
correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You're dismissed from the witness stand. Thank you. Please watch your step as you exit. And did you have did you have an exhibit up there?
I do.
I'll take it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
May we approach your Honor?
Certainly. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take an early lunch, so you're going to have an extended lunch break today. It is 25:01. We will commence evidence again at 2 p.m. So have a good lunch. Please remind yourselves of your juror conduct and the obligations and rules that we've gone over. Avoid anyone, don't talk to anyone, and don't do any independent research. And I do just want to remind you that you cannot discuss the case amongst yourselves either at this point, okay? Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch. Court stands in recess until 2 p.m.
All rise, court is in recess. Please gather your belongings.